Crash! Bang! Screech! I lurch out of bed like I've been hit by a truck. Another bang! Something's getting murdered outside. I fling the door open and nearly choke on what I see. Karen, wild-eyed, soaked in sweat, swinging a crowbar like she's breaking into Fort Knox. "You think this wall can stop me?" she howls, slamming metal against my fence. Clang, clang! Sparks explode into the night air like fireworks on the 4th of July. "Karen, have you lost your damn mind?" I yell, stumbling barefoot onto the porch. "I built this neighborhood!" she screams, crowbar vibrating in her hands as it ricochets off steel. "I am the HOA! This fence is an insult to everything I stand for!" Crack! Another blow. The fence groans but doesn't break. I stare at her, mouth open. This isn't the clipboard-carrying HOA queen from yesterday. This is Karen unleashed, feral, unhinged, and gunning for blood. "You're trespassing!" I bark. "Trespassing! This is my land!" she shrieks, spit flying. "I will tear down every inch of this abomination, do you hear me?" Neighbors' windows light up one by one. Curtains rustle. I see Mr. Leonard out in slippers, eyes wide, whispering, "Holy hell!" Karen keeps swinging. "The HOA is law. I am the law. This fence is an act of war." I pull out my phone, hand shaking. 911? Yeah, send someone fast. HOA president is trying to reenact The Shining in my backyard. Karen lunges at me, crowbar raised. "You think you can beat me? You think you can outsmart me?" As she charges, the sound of sirens splits the night. Wee-oo, wee-oo, red and blue flood the street. "Drop it!" an officer bellows. Karen freezes, staring at the cops like a cornered animal. "You can't stop me!" she roars. "I run this place!" The crowbar clangs to the ground. She falls to her knees, gasping, mascara dripping like black tears. "You're all sheep!" she spits at the neighbors now gathering on lawns. "Sheep! I was your leader!" I step closer, heart pounding. "No, Karen, you were just the storm." And as they haul her into the cruiser, kicking and screaming, one thought hits me like a sledgehammer. Karen's reign may be over, but this street will never be the same. Because the thing about fences, they don't just keep people out. They keep things in. And tonight, something darker got unleashed. It started the day I decided to fix my old wooden fence. I'd woken up early feeling a dull ache in my lower back. An occupational hazard when you've spent most of your life hoisting lumber and pouring concrete. But I powered through because the fence was leaning ominously, as if one good gust of wind would knock it clean over. I've lived in the Maplewood Estates community for a few years, bought my house at a good price thinking it'd be a quiet place to settle down. Sure, there was a homeowners association, but the rules seemed straightforward at the time. Keep your lawn trimmed, store your trash cans out of sight, nothing too crazy. I figured I'd get along fine, especially since I'm a builder by trade. I know my way around a homeowner's rulebook. That morning, I pulled out my toolbox, grabbed a few spare boards from the workshop, and started replacing rotten planks along the fence line. The job should have been simple, just a standard bit of upkeep. But right around noon, I spotted movement at the corner of my eye. Click, click, click. That unmistakable sound of high heels on pavement. I didn't even have to look up to know it was Karen, the HOA president. She rules our little neighborhood like it's her own private kingdom, always dressed in something designer, always with a clipboard tucked under her arm, ready to hand out fines or citations the moment she sees a stray weed. She approached, eyeing me like I was committing a capital offense. "Excuse me," she said, voice sharp enough to cut through my thoughts. "Are you authorized to make those changes to your fence?" I don't recall seeing an official request. I explained, as calmly as I could, that I was just repairing broken boards, routine maintenance. No big deal, no modifications, nothing requiring formal approval. But the look on Karen's face told me she had other ideas. She tapped that clipboard and said, "Routine maintenance is one thing, but these boards appear new, and I need to confirm they're in line with the architectural guidelines." I tried to reason with her. "Karen, these are the exact same boards I used when I built the fence in the first place. I've got receipts and all. There's no aesthetic change." But she just scribbled something down, tore off a sheet, and handed it to me. It was a violation notice. And not just a warning, a $200 fine due in 7 days. She made sure to mention that each subsequent violation would double. Then she flashed a smile so cold it could have frozen my porch swing, turned on her heel, and left me standing there, furious and confused. As I watched her heels click away, I felt my pulse spike. How could such a small fix blow up into a hefty fine? Something told me this was more than just a misunderstanding. My fence was apparently the least of Karen's concerns. She wanted control, and I was in her crosshairs. I stared at the piece of paper in my hand. $200 for replacing a few rotten planks? That was only the beginning. I didn't realize it yet, but I had just stepped onto a battleground and Karen was ready to wage war. Later that afternoon, I went inside to check on my uncle who was resting in the recliner. He's been living with me for the past few months, ever since he had heart surgery. He's not old exactly, but he's not a kid either, and the doctor said he needed a stress-free environment while he recovered. Maplewood Estates sounded perfect for a guy who needed peace and quiet. But with Karen breathing down my neck, peaceful wasn't exactly the word I'd use. I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. "Unc, looks like we might have a small snag with the HOA. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. You just focus on healing." He nodded, but I could tell he felt a bit guilty. He'd offered to chip in for the fence fix, worried that the cost of new lumber might set me back. Now we had an even bigger expense, a $200 fine. When I went outside again, I found a freshly printed envelope stuffed in my mailbox, another official notice from the HOA. It reiterated the fine and added a pointed postscript in neat cursive. "Next time, consult your HOA president before making changes." I fumed. This had to be some petty power play, but I needed to be sure I was on solid ground. I'm a hands-on guy. I'd rather talk to neighbors than bury myself in paperwork. Still, I headed to the garage, rummaged through boxes until I found the big binder with our HOA rules. I flipped to the section about exterior modifications. Sure enough, it clearly stated that routine maintenance did not require prior approval, as long as it didn't alter the fence height or design. My boards matched perfectly, so I was clean. That evening, I decided to consult a local attorney, someone who specialized in homeowner disputes. I found a small law office downtown, Runyon and Associates. The attorney there, Miss Runyon, was sympathetic. She dealt with more than a few miniature dictators in these associations. After I explained the situation, she nodded thoughtfully and asked for photos, receipts, and the exact wording of the citation. "Well, based on what you're showing me, it sounds like you have a legitimate case," she said. "But HOAs can be tricky. There are often hidden clauses that let them fine you for the smallest thing. My advice is to file an immediate appeal. Put them on notice that you're prepared to push back." "An appeal costs $50, I grumbled. "They make you pay just to defend yourself," she shrugged. "Still cheaper than multiple fines. And if you win, you can request a refund of that appeal fee." I left her office with a folder full of photocopies and a new sense of determination. If Karen thought she could squeeze money out of me or intimidate me, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I've built entire apartment complexes from the ground up, wrestled with city inspectors, dealt with stubborn subcontractors. There was no way I'd roll over for some power-hungry HOA president. Little did I know, Karen was about to escalate things in a way that would threaten not only my wallet, but the very peace my uncle needed. It started like any other early morning. I was heading to my workshop before sunrise, hoping to get a head start on a custom bench order. But as soon as I opened the garage door, I stopped dead in my tracks. My driveway was littered, absolutely covered with pamphlets. I crouched to pick one up and my jaw clenched as I read the headline, "Protect Our Property Values, Enforce the Bylaws." Below that, an inflammatory block of text ranted about rogue projects and unregulated structures threatening the harmony of Maplewood Estates. There were even scare tactics about declining home values and chaos taking root if rules aren't enforced. At the bottom, printed in smaller type like a signature on a threat letter, authorized by Karen Walker, HOA president. It didn't name me directly, but it didn't have to. The timing, the language, the message, it all pointed at me. Karen had gone from fines to a public smear campaign. I glanced up and noticed the pamphlets weren't just in my driveway. They were on Leonard's lawn across the street, tucked into mailboxes, wedged into fences, even fluttering on the wind. She'd hit the entire block. I could almost hear her voice in my head, smug, self-satisfied. Just protecting the neighborhood. My stomach turned. I scooped up as many of the leaflets as I could and stuffed them into the trash. As I did, Mr. Leonard finally pulled his blinds all the way open and stepped out onto his porch. He crossed his arms. "Don't let her get to you. She tried the same crap when the Johnsons put in that new patio. Claimed it would bring down the whole zip code." "Yeah, well, this feels personal," I replied. Leonard nodded grimly. "It is. She's scared of losing control." Later that morning, I hopped into my truck, anger still simmering beneath the surface. I planned to stock up on extra materials at the hardware store. Sturdier lumber, steel brackets, the works. If Karen wanted to escalate, so would I. As I backed out, my heart sank further. There she was, Karen herself, marching up the sidewalk like a general inspecting her troops. Her phone was glued to her ear, but her posture screamed victory. She grinned when she saw me, giving me the kind of look that said, "Checkmate." I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. For a split second I considered rolling down the window and calling her out right there, but I forced myself to breathe. No, not yet. Let her think she's winning. As I drove past, I could hear her faintly barking orders into the phone. "Yes, circulate them again. No exceptions. And get me a list of all homeowners who failed to comply with landscaping standards." My gut twisted. She was escalating this war. It wasn't just about my fence anymore. Karen was mobilizing, turning neighbors into informants. At a red light, my phone buzzed. A text from Miss Runyon. "Call me ASAP. I think Karen just overstepped." I stared at the screen, pulse quickening. If Karen's smear campaign was just the beginning, what the hell was her next move? The next day, I took Miss Runyon's advice and filed an official appeal with the HOA. It cost me that $50 fee, which stung, but I wanted everything on record. I wrote a polite but firm letter, citing the specific clause that allowed routine maintenance without prior approval, then attached photos of the fence. I included receipts for the exact brand of lumber I used, identical to the existing fence boards. While drafting the appeal, I kept thinking about how Karen acted so sure of herself. Where did that confidence come from? So I dug deeper, scouring the full text of our HOA bylaws, looking for any obscure rule that might let her justify the fine. Buried in a footnote was a vague statement about visible changes to the facade or perimeter of the property, requiring additional review. But it was overshadowed by another clause that clearly said, if you're not changing the dimensions, you're free to proceed. In simpler terms, her argument held no water. Still, I sensed that Karen had a knack for twisting the bylaws to suit her agenda. She'd probably try to spin that footnote as ironclad proof I'd done something wrong. That evening, over a home-cooked dinner, I updated my uncle. "I've got Miss Runyon preparing a letter to the HOA board," I said. "She'll argue that Karen's interpretation is flawed. We'll see if the board listens." My uncle sipped some tea and looked me in the eye. "Just be careful," he said softly. "I'm no lawyer, but I've seen folks in these communities lose thousands of dollars to malicious HOAs. Don't let stress wreck your focus. You've got your own health to think about, not to mention mine." He was right. I did feel the stress creeping in, knotting up my shoulders, gnawing at my gut. But I also felt a surge of defiance. I was tired of bullies, especially ones who hid behind official titles. As I washed dishes, I thought about what line Karen might cross next. Deep down, I had a sense she wouldn't stop at a single fine, not by a long shot. It was a Saturday morning, the kind where the air smells like fresh-cut grass and coffee, and you think you might just get a peaceful day for once. I was halfway through sanding a cedar bench on the porch when a thunderous knock rattled the front door. Not a polite knock. The kind of knock you hear when someone's demanding answers. I wiped my hands on my jeans, stepped to the door, and swung it open. And there she was. Karen, standing a step behind two men in matching khakis and polo shirts, each wearing a plastic lanyard ID like they were on some official government task force. Karen stood with her arms crossed, chin tilted up, smug as a cat that caught a mouse. The taller guy spoke first. "Good morning. I'm Greg, licensed inspector working with the HOA. This is Earl, our contractor." His voice was calm. But there was that edge, the kind bureaucrats use when they already assume you're guilty. Karen didn't say a word, just smiled like she was watching the opening scene of a play she'd written herself. Greg flipped open a black folder. "We've had reports of non-compliance regarding your property's perimeter structure." I stared at him, jaw tight. "You mean my fence?" Earl grunted. "We're here to make sure it follows HOA regulations. It's a courtesy inspection." "Courtesy, my ass." Karen finally spoke, her voice sugary sweet but sharp as barbed wire. "Since you've been slow to respond to previous notices, the board thought it best to expedite matters." I could feel my blood pressure climbing. "Expedite? You fined me on Tuesday and it's Saturday." Greg raised a brow, flipping a page. "Mind if we take a look inside and out? It'll only take a few minutes." Every fiber in my body wanted to slam the door in their faces, but years on construction sites had taught me patience. Never show your anger first. I stepped aside. "Sure," I said flatly. "Make yourselves comfortable." They walked through my living room, barely glancing at the family photos on the mantel or the stack of medical bills peeking from my coffee table. My uncle coughed softly from his chair, raising a hand in greeting. Karen ignored him completely. Greg scribbled something in his notes as they moved toward the back door. "Nice house," Earl muttered half-heartedly, but there was no warmth in it. Once outside, Earl produced a tape measure like a gunslinger unholstering his weapon. They measured the fence at various points, all while Karen stood with her arms folded, eyes locked on me like a hawk circling prey. Earl shook his head. I'm getting a reading of 6'4" on this end." "That's because the yard slopes downhill," I shot back. "The fence itself is dead level. Look at the top line." Greg crouched near one of the posts. "Maybe the soil settled unevenly." Karen stepped in, voice dripping with false concern. "Our guidelines require uniform height from the viewer's perspective. Unfortunately, this section breaks that guideline." I could feel the heat rising in my face. "So because my backyard slopes 2 inches, you're slapping me with another violation?" Karen's smile widened. "Rules are rules." My fists clenched so tight my knuckles popped. "You and I both know this is a technicality you're twisting. HOA regs say modifications need approval. I didn't modify anything." Greg tore a notice from his folder and handed it to me. "Another violation. Another $200. I glared at him. "You boys always this generous on weekends?" Karen chimed in before they could answer. "We care deeply about maintaining property values, Mr. Carson. We wouldn't want neighboring homes to suffer due to one homeowner's negligence." "Negligence," I repeated, almost laughing. "I built this fence myself. It's straight as an arrow. You're just fishing." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Your appeal is pending. Until then, these fines are valid." Greg cleared his throat. "We're done here." As they made their way to the front yard, I followed, barely containing the storm brewing inside me. Karen lingered at my doorstep. "We'll be in touch," she said softly with that same poisonous grin. "And Carson, I'd recommend reviewing Section 14, subsection B. You might find it enlightening." I slammed the door shut behind them, rattling the hinges. My heart pounded like a jackhammer. 2 fines in 1 week, and now they were crawling around my property like it was some crime scene. I leaned against the door, staring at the new violation notice in my hand. They were setting me up, trying to make me crack under pressure, bleed me dry with technicalities until I gave in or packed up and left. In the distance, through the blinds, I saw Karen and Greg talking by the curb. She gestured toward my house, looking smug and triumphant. Greg just nodded, already stuffing his clipboard into a bag like he had his next target lined up. I turned away from the window, fists still clenched. "No," I whispered to myself, "you're not breaking me. Not today." But as I walked past my uncle's chair, I noticed him holding his chest, face pale and strained. My stomach dropped. Karen's harassment wasn't just pushing my buttons. It was threatening someone I loved. And I knew then this wasn't about fences anymore. This was war. By the time I got off the phone with Miss Runyon that night, I was pacing my living room like a caged animal. My uncle's soft breathing from the recliner across the room did nothing to calm me. If anything, it made me more furious. "That's it," I muttered under my breath. "She wants a war? She's getting one." When I called Miss Runyon back, my voice came out sharper than I intended. "They're baiting me, stacking fines like bricks to build a wall around my own damn home. Karen just threw 2 more violations at me, one for fence height and now some nonsense about non-uniform design. She stayed calm, professional. Listen to me. We're going to hit them where it hurts, legally. I recommend filing for an injunction immediately. If the HOA is overstepping its authority, we can argue they're creating a hostile environment. I scoffed. An injunction sounds like something out of a courtroom drama. What am I supposed to tell people? That I'm taking out a restraining order on my own neighborhood? You'd be surprised how often it happens, she replied, especially when HOAs abuse their power. We'll build the case around the emotional and physical toll on you and your uncle. His recovery adds a human element the court can't ignore. I turned and looked at him. He'd dozed off mid-TV show again, but his face was paler than usual, drawn tight like he'd aged a few years in just a few weeks. I'll do whatever it takes, I muttered. She's not just harassing me anymore. She's poisoning this whole house. Runyon's voice softened. Exactly. The stress they're creating could easily be considered irreparable harm. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Fine, let's file the paperwork. For the next few days, it was all a blur. Nights on job sites pouring concrete until my back screamed for mercy. Days juggling phone calls with Miss Runyon as she drafted the injunction. She combed through the HOA bylaws like a hawk, highlighting the contradictions Karen didn't think anyone would notice. Section 12 said one thing, Section 14 said another, and there it was. Karen was playing fast and loose with rules that were never meant to apply in my situation. She's building a case on technicalities, Runyon explained, but we've got her beat on black and white text. The judge will see it. Still, every time I came home, I felt the noose tightening. Another nasty gram in my mailbox, Karen's smug smile lingering in my mind. I even caught Earl, the so-called contractor from the inspection, snooping around my side yard late one afternoon. He tried to play it off like he was just checking sightlines, but I told him to get lost before I put him through the fence myself. Finally, Runyon filed the motion. She included not just the legal breakdown, but a section on how Karen's repeated harassment could directly impact my uncle's health. When I read it, I felt a twinge of guilt dragging him into this fight, but also anger. I wasn't the one putting him at risk. Karen was. While we waited for the court's response, I pushed harder at work, took every weekend job I could find, burned the candle at both ends. I'd be damned if I let her bleed me dry. I'd outwork every fine she threw at me if I had to. One night, exhausted, I collapsed on the couch, still in my boots. The house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock and the occasional creak of old floorboards. For the first time in weeks, I let my eyes close, and then, buzz. My phone vibrated on the coffee table, screen glowing in the dark. Miss Runyon's name flashed across it. I grabbed it, heart pounding. The voicemail came through seconds later. Call me back. The HOA responded to our injunction in a way you're not going to believe. I stared at the phone, pulse racing. My gut told me Karen wasn't backing down. No, she was about to make a move so outrageous it could push this whole thing over the edge. The minute I hung up the phone, I didn't just feel angry. I felt wired, ready to fight. My eyes darted toward the workshop in the back of the house. If Karen wanted a war, I'd give her a fortress. That same night, fueled by pure adrenaline, I started sketching plans for a towering fence, not 6 feet, not even 8. I was going for the full 12 feet along the side of my property that faced Karen's house directly. Thick, pressure-treated lumber, reinforced steel posts, and angled panels to block every inch of her line of sight. By dawn, I was already hauling lumber onto my truck bed. My contractor buddies owed me a few favors, and by lunchtime, we had the first posts sunk deep into concrete footings. As we worked, I could feel Karen's stare from across the street, burning holes in my back like a sniper. She didn't come over, but I saw her pacing behind her window, cell phone glued to her ear. By sunset, half the wall was up, 12 feet tall, solid, and defiant. The next morning, my phone rang again. Miss Runyon's voice cut through the line like a knife. "Brace yourself," she said. "The HOA is pushing back hard. They're accusing you of unauthorized construction, demanding an immediate teardown." I clenched my jaw. Let them try. But then she dropped the real bombshell. We also received internal HOA documents during discovery. Karen's been moving funds, tens of thousands labeled as beautification expenses, but with no receipts. She's skimming money from HOA fines. My blood ran cold. So she's extorting the entire neighborhood. Exactly. I felt like punching through drywall. I'm done playing defense. I'm finishing this fence. 3 days later, as we bolted the final panels into place, Karen finally broke. She stormed across the street, her high heels stabbing into my freshly poured concrete walkway. "You've lost your mind!" she screamed, waving a crumpled HOA notice in my face. "This is an egregious violation! This monstrosity is twice the height limit!" I wiped sweat off my brow. "I stayed up all night reading every word of the bylaws. There's no height restriction for side yard privacy fences, Karen. None." She blinked, stunned for half a second, then regained composure. "The Architectural Review Committee will overturn this. Mark my words." I grinned. Funny, because I just got the committee's approval this morning. I pulled a crisp document from my back pocket, the official stamped permit from the HOA board secretary, who, as it turned out, wasn't as loyal to Karen as she thought. Karen's jaw dropped. "Impossible! That's forged! Verified and signed." I waved it like a trophy. "Filed under Section 9, subsection D. You should brush up on the regs." She snatched the paper from my hand, scanning it frantically, her face turning from red to white. "While you were too busy cooking books, I was busy doing things by the book," I added. Behind me, my uncle chuckled weakly from the porch. Even my crew, who'd been silently working all morning, exchanged glances of disbelief. Karen clenched the permit, her knuckles turning bone white. "You haven't heard the last of this," she hissed. "No," I shot back, stepping closer. "But you have." She stormed off, trembling with fury, while I turned to my crew and said, "Let's make sure this wall lasts forever." But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done yet, and the next time she'd come back with teeth bared. The moment I walked into that clubhouse, the air felt electric. The room was packed tighter than a Friday night bar. Folks who'd never shown up to HOA meetings before were standing along the walls, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, hungry for blood, or at least for answers. Karen strutted in minutes later, all sharp angles and fake confidence, flanked by her 2 loyal lapdogs from the board. Her blazer was pristine, her heels louder than ever against the linoleum floor. She didn't even glance at me as she made a beeline for the head table, flipping through papers like a judge ready to sentence someone. I could feel every muscle in my neck tighten as I took my seat up front, gripping 2 thick folders. One held my fence permits, the other the smoking gun, the evidence of Karen's financial misdeeds. Karen slammed her gavel and launched straight into her speech, voice dripping with condescension. "Tonight, we address the growing disregard for community standards, spearheaded by one individual who has built a structure that threatens the harmony and value of Maplewood Estates." She pointed directly at me. "Mr. Carson has erected an illegal 12-foot fence that blatantly violates our guidelines." A wave of murmurs spread through the room. I stood up slowly. "You mean this fence?" I asked, pulling out my stamped, signed approval. "The one your own board authorized under Section 9, subsection D?" Karen's eyes flickered. I stepped forward. "Let me be clear. Everything I've built is by the book. Every plank, every post, every bolt, but you already knew that." Gasps rippled through the audience as I flipped open my second folder. "What you didn't know," I said, voice rising, "is how Karen has been funneling HOA funds into phantom projects, beautification expenses that somehow never beautified anything." I held up emails and ledgers for all to see. "That's a lie!" Karen snapped. "No, it's proof," I shot back. "Proof that while you were fining people for weeds and toys left out overnight, you were lining your own pockets." A woman near the front stood up. "Is that why the playground repairs never happened?" Another man followed, red-faced. "I paid a $300 fine for a mailbox that wasn't HOA approved. Where did that money go, Karen?" Karen banged her gavel furiously. "Order! This is slander!" But the crowd had turned. Then, as if on cue, Miss Runyon stepped into the room, calm, collected, unstoppable. "My client has secured a court order," she announced. "An audit is underway. Karen, you'll be required to turn over all financial records immediately." Karen's composure shattered like glass. She bolted from her chair, marched toward me, and stabbed a finger into my chest. "You smug son of a—" I didn't flinch. "That fence will stand long after you're gone." "You have no idea what I've done to keep this place afloat," she shrieked. "I think we all do now," I said, stepping aside as she spun to face the furious room. Neighbors were shouting now, some calling for her resignation, others threatening legal action. Even the two board members who'd flanked her earlier were now visibly distancing themselves. Karen's breathing was ragged. She staggered back to her seat but couldn't sit still, fists clenched, eyes darting. Hook. And then, for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw it, the crack beneath the polished surface. Karen wasn't just losing control, she was unraveling, and somehow I knew she wasn't done yet. I thought it was over. The audit was underway. Karen had been publicly humiliated, and my fence stood tall and proud like a monument to defiance. But I underestimated just how deep her need for control went. 2 nights later, well past midnight, I woke to the sound of wood splintering. At first, I thought it was a raccoon or some animal, but then I heard the unmistakable clang of metal on metal. I grabbed my boots, threw on a jacket, and bolted out the door. The security light on the side of my house flickered on just in time to illuminate Karen, wielding a crowbar, furiously prying at one of the steel fence posts. "Karen!" I shouted, storming across the yard. She spun around, hair wild, eyes wide with manic rage. You ruined everything! This eyesore is coming down tonight!" I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She was drenched in sweat, wearing pajamas and a pair of dirty sneakers, looking nothing like the polished tyrant from the meetings. "You're trespassing!" I barked. She snarled, slamming the crowbar into the fence again. "Trespassing! This is my neighborhood! I've kept this place from turning into a slum." I stepped closer. "You've been stealing from these people, Karen. You're no savior. You're a crook." "You don't get it!" she shrieked. "I deserve every dime I took. While you people were mowing your lawns and sipping lemonade, I was fighting to keep property values high. You were fighting to pad your wallet." She swung wildly at another post. "They don't appreciate me. None of them do. I gave my life to this community." At that moment, I noticed lights turning on across the street. Neighbors were starting to come out in their robes, watching from their porches. "Karen, it's over!" I yelled. "Drop the crowbar before you do something you can't walk back from." She pointed the tool at me like it was a weapon. "You and your stupid fence! You poisoned them all against me! They're sheep!" "They're tired of being bullied," I snapped, her face twisted. "They need me! Without me, this neighborhood will rot. I'm the only one who cared." From behind me, Mr. Leonard's voice cut through the night. "You cared about power, not people." Karen whipped around, eyes darting to the growing crowd. "You fined me for flowers," Mrs. Hill from 2 doors down called out. "You charged me for painting my shutters blue." Another voice chimed in. Karen's voice cracked. "Those were violations. You can't just let chaos in." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Yeah, we need police. HOA president destroying private property." Karen froze for a heartbeat, then sprinted toward me, crowbar raised. "You don't get to win!" Before she could close the gap, flashing blue and red lights tore through the darkness. A squad car slid to a stop. "Drop it!" the first officer barked. Karen hesitated, turning wildly between me, the cops, and the angry neighbors. The second officer edged closer. "Drop the crowbar now!" Her grip loosened. The tool hit the grass with a thud. She fell to her knees, breath ragged. As they cuffed her, she screamed, "I'm the only reason your houses are worth anything. He's the cancer, not me." "Enough!" an officer barked. "I kept this place perfect," she wailed. "I was the glue." "No," I said calmly. "You were the poison." Karen's eyes burned into me as they dragged her to her feet. "They'll tear that fence down. You'll see. You'll all beg me to come back," neighbors murmured behind me. "You've lost, Karen," I said, "for good." The officers led her to the cruiser. As they passed Mrs. Hill, Karen lunged toward her, hissing, "Traitor!" before getting yanked back. The doors slammed shut behind her, but her shouts still echoed from inside the car. As the cruiser drove off, silence settled over the block. Mr. Leonard stepped closer, voice low. "She finally snapped, huh?" "Yeah," I sighed, "and the whole town saw it." I glanced back at my fence. scratched and battered, but still standing tall. And this time I knew. Karen wasn't coming back.